This week's episode is brought to you by Adorama Pix. From photo books to prints on paper, metal, or canvas, Adorama Pix can help you to preserve and display your most precious memories. And by viewers like you. Visit photorec.tv/support to learn how you can support this show and join our community of photographers. Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Photo Mishmash. This is episode 93. Welcome back. This is that show where me, in this case, a studio guest, we'll get to in just a second, we take the week's photography news, we mash it all up and share it with you. We've got some great discussion. We've got some really cool gear on the table. And your Instagram challenge winners. We're going to share all of that in just a little bit, plus your questions answered live. So if you have a burning photography question, or non-burning, you can stick it in the chat room and Roy will pull that out and we'll answer that at the end of the show. But I want to welcome our in-studio guest, Steve. This is Steve Holmes of Steve Holmes Photography. I've wanted to have you, some part of my channel forever. And, with a move imminent out of this area, I thought, I better do it before I'm too far away. You run a successful wedding and portrait business just across the river in New Hampshire. And Christina and I both have shot with you tons for weddings and other events as well. And we just were in New York City together last week.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. And well, you brought along a pretty exciting piece of gear that...
Oh, that's not your camera?
Oh, did we fool you? That is Steve's Nikon D5. So we'll be talking a little bit about some, well, maybe some of you consider controversial switching from one ship, let's call them a ship, to the other. And this is a regular old show and just a couple programming notes. One, next week I'll be traveling, so Scott is going to bring you all something. We haven't quite decided what, but it will start at 5 o'clock next week, so 1 hour earlier than normal. That's 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, because that's where we are right now. And as we get into this regular show, we first share some, week in review, in case you missed it. The first thing I want to mention is that my studio tour, you've all seen this, you see this right now, but if you ever were curious about what the rest of this, probably surprisingly to most of you, small space looks like, you should watch. It's 41 minutes long. Mostly what I learned from making that video is I do like to talk. And so you see everything. It's pretty messy. And I share a few secrets about this channel in that video. So if you haven't watched it, take some time, go watch it, and I think you'll enjoy it. Steve, you've seen some of this stuff, and now you walk in person. What do you think?
It always feels good to be surrounded by gear. Right?
You like that? Yeah.
That's right.
Now, I've been in your studio. We should pull up at some point in this show. We should pull up because you, in the last couple of years, had a really nice studio built on your property.
Yeah. So 2.5 years ago, we built a studio on the property. Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
Thanks.
It's a little bit bigger than this. A little bit. Mm-hmm. A little bit more organized, but it's a really nice space.
Storage room, we keep that door closed.
I think I've seen in there. I think it's still more organized than what I've got going on over there, but it's pretty nice. Other things that you might have missed this week. I think that's really the only video that's gone out since the last podcast. So we will have some exciting content coming up, though, including finally my Star Trails tutorial will be out a little bit later this week. And of course, as I said, I'm traveling to Moab, so be on the lookout for those vlogs. I asked you all through the newsletter and on Facebook earlier this week what you want to see more of in those vlogs. And funny enough, you said more photography tips and tricks, which I hear. So I'll be making sure that I'm packing those as full as possible with photography tips and tricks as we're out there with the McKays shooting that kind of amazing environment. Beautiful. You've spent a little time out there?
I have. I've hiked a lot in southern Utah. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. It's an amazing landscape that is just so different than anything we have around here. I love it. I'm looking forward. I haven't been out there since I was in my low 20s, and I had an SLR camera at the time. I kind of knew what I was doing, but I'm excited to go back.
Yeah,
should be good. And we can't forget Pixel. So you all suggested a bunch of great names. Angela collected them together and with the help of the Patreon group voted, and now you can meet Pixel. I don't know if Pixel's a girl or a boy. You can decide that and leave nice comments in down below. We're going to get into our news stories in just a minute, but a reminder that all of the articles we talk about, links to your Instagram and your Facebook, that's all right down below this video, so you should check that stuff out. And people can follow you on Instagram and check out your Facebook page as well. You produce a lot of really nice work.
Thanks, Toby.
Sure. I think, all of that said, we can get right into the news and talk a little bit about some of these articles. So the first article that Scott shared with us is scientists are using DNA to store digital photos. Now, the second part of that is, this title is to store digital photos for centuries. Mm-hmm. I can't quite figure that centuries part out, but we'll get to that in a second. This is a pretty cool article, a pretty cool science. Basically, DNA, which we have inside of us, tells us how we look and all of that stuff. All living creatures have some DNA, can store data, and it can store it incredibly efficiently, way more than anything we've come up with so far. So I just think that's really cool that there's this natural system that is way more efficient than anything we've got. 10,000 gigs of data can be stored in a tiny smear of DNA nestled at the bottom of a test tube. And for example there, I guess we have a test tube that shows a tiny smear of DNA.
What if we are already storing photos for alien species that have stored their photos in our DNA?
Oh, so we are like walking memory cards?
That's right. Think about that.
That's an interesting thought. That kind of makes me think of like, was it Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy,
Right.
where we're just a giant science experiment.
That's right,
yeah. Right, yeah. Maybe on slow days I'm just one of those old SD cards. That's
right.
That's what I think I am.
I don't know, we can put DNA in here, right?
Well, that's the question. How many years, do you think before we're going to have little test tubes sticking out of the side of our camera that's where this data is getting written to?
Right.
It's going to be a little while. What I don't understand, in chat room, maybe there's a science genius in there, a DNA. First off, I want to see somebody type out what DNA stands for. First person that does that, I'll give them a thumbs up. But how for centuries? Because the way our DNA works in our body now is it's replicating, right? And it's, as cells are dividing, that DNA is carried forward, and that's new. So how are they going to keep this going for centuries?
Good
Any
question.
ideas?
I have no ideas, but I'd like to see what a mutated photo looks like.
Oh, right. That reminds me. There is a great comment down here. It is, somebody says, dude, your pictures went viral. and the response to that is, yeah, they're still working on a vaccine for it. So yeah, that brings up a totally new way to go viral. It's an interesting idea, and it's one of those ones I feel like maybe 30 years from now, but probably before then, not so much. I don't know. It's interesting.
Oh, we got some, yeah.
Yep.
Who's the first?
Deoxyribonucleic acid. Who was the first? I think.
Yeah, I'm not going to try to pronounce that one.
I think that's Joa, but I don't know. Hoa. I've probably, anyway. It's every once in a while I try to pronounce names and do very bad. Moving on to some old tech that's been recreated for future is the Impossible Project. Now, the Impossible Project folks have reverse engineered Polaroid film, and for many years, probably about 5 now, I think their project has been going on. You can buy Polaroid-like film from them. I don't think we can call it Polaroids because they'll get sued. And put it in your old Polaroid camera and take some pictures. They've decided that it's starting to get tough to get your hands on some of these old Polaroid cameras, so why not make a new Polaroid camera? It looks kind of nifty. It's going to be called the i1. It's going to be available in just a couple of weeks for $300. It works like a classic Polaroid camera. You put the film cartridge in there, you take a photo, and out pops a blank photo that slowly develops itself. And it's got some new features to it, like a circular flash ringed with LEDs that automatically adjust intensity. It's going to have a rechargeable battery. And we were talking about this before the show a little bit. There's going to be a companion smartphone app that allows the camera to be wirelessly controlled, and giving you manual control over shutter speed and aperture, and you can override the intelligent flash's automatic adjustments. So that's kind of cool that you're going to have more control, certainly more control than any Polaroid camera ever. They're all, as far as I know, any Polaroid camera I've ever put my hands on is fully automatic.
Yeah, it seems a little contrary to the whole aesthetic of a Polaroid, that you just lose a little bit of that control, but it's interesting concept.
Yep. We're talking, though, it's a little interesting that the most of that control you're getting back happens through the app.
Right.
So then you're kind of juggling an app in your hand and the camera in the other. I wonder if in the future there will be a way to stick your phone onto this camera, or maybe there is even now, although it doesn't say it. I gotta wonder what the market is for something like this, because it's not cheap. The film we're looking at, it's $24 basically for
That's
8
for
pictures.
8, yeah. That's expensive.
And there are people who shoot film and love shooting film for that kind of that film look. And Polaroid, while being film, is a whole nother category and very different, and doesn't quite give that look, but has a look of its own.
It's a big camera too. If you look at the size of it, the picture in that person's hand is fairly big.
That's true. And like some of those Polaroids, it does not look like it collapses down, like some of the old ones too. Right, exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. You said your daughter is interested?
In a Polaroid, she wouldn't be interested in that. I think it's too big, but she would be interested in one of the small portable ones, like the Instax. That she's asked for that before. Mm-hmm. We gave her one of the printers that she can connect to a smartphone. And that wasn't what she wanted. No. She really likes the appeal of having a built-in camera with a built-in printer that just puts out photos right away. It's just kind of interesting. I mean, I think there's an appeal to that generation for that kind of a retro thing.
Certainly, a retro with immediacy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
You got to balance that.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've been intrigued by the idea of those little printers. It certainly is a neat idea. I like the printers versus a camera that prints something out, because
a little more versatile.
A little more versatile, a little more control, and I decide when I want to use it. Maybe not for every picture I take, but some of them.
Yeah.
What was it you were talking about before the show that has some color issues, color casts?
The little printer that we gave her, I was surprised with how inaccurate the color was coming out of it. It just looks very different on the phone than it does when it's printed.
Yeah.
A pretty big mismatch, which is a little bit of a disappointment for something like that. You'd think it could be just a little better. I mean, you're not going to get a perfectly color-controlled environment, but I was expecting it to be a little bit better than it was.
In the range of, that's close, right?
Yeah. It was more in the range of, what's that?
Where your orange looks red.
Yeah, it's pretty off. Yeah.
Who was that?
I can't remember which one it was. It was either the Kodak or the Fuji. I don't remember which one it was.
That is a little disappointing. We'll see. But this is interesting, and it feels fairly niche market, but maybe teenagers around the world will be snapping it up, although it is kind of big. So we'll see. Now, related to gear on the table. So we often talk about gear on the table. We actually kind of skipped that part because we're going to be discussing it in a little bit more detail. We have Amazon reaching out to people who bought the Nikon D5, saying, hey, you get a free 32 gigabyte XQD memory card, because one of the things the Nikon D5 does, and I think the D500 also has one slot, is this new XQD memory, which is kind of about the size of compact flash, but
similar,
yeah, maybe it's but a whole lot faster. And this would be a good point to talk about. You opted to go with the CF cards.
So yeah, you can purchase the D5 either with the XQDs or the CF cards. Mm-hmm. I think they produced a lot more of the XQDs. I remember reading that their production was 90% XQDs and 10%, really? Something like that, if that's true or not. And while the XQD is appealing, the speed, one thing that I learned is that it's pretty easy to switch down the road. So you can send the camera in and they'll just switch out the slots. So later, if I'm ready to jump to XQDs, I can just send the camera into Nikon and they'll change that out. That's what I chose to do because I have a bunch of really big, expensive CF cards, a bunch of CF readers, and for me and what I shoot, that's fast enough. I do download images at events sometimes, and having a little bit more speed, both writing and reading, is appealing. Mm-hmm. So I imagine it's probably something I'll do down the road, but it's nice to know I can start with CF and change later and not be committed by the camera body.
Right, yeah. It certainly is. It's an expense you have to consider. A 32 gigabyte, which is not very big when you're thinking about walking into a wedding, is 91. And then, the 64 is not too bad at
I think,
109.
is Lexar making XQD now too? I know it was Sony originally. I think Lexar is starting to make some too, if I remember correctly.
Oh,
They don't make an XQD.
No.
There we go. Yeah, they
Yep.
do. Yep.
Yep.
But
Okay.
they're expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, they're expensive as well.
Yeah, like any new tech, it'll come down once they're
That's
out
right.
there.
That's right. So maybe after XQD, we'll be the DNA. We'll just jump right to the DNA.
Right.
So I think that's smart, and I think that's nice of Nikon to provide the option. I'm surprised that it is 90%. If that's
true,
correct.
yeah. I think so, yeah.
It'll be interesting. There's rumors. This isn't the show notes or rundown, but there's rumors of Sony coming out with a very fast DSLR-like mirrorless that's going to rely on XQD to allow unlimited raw buffering. No word on how many frames per second that is. Oh, speaking of frames per second,
Should we
hear
do
it for a minute?
Yeah,
Let's
just
hear.
Here. Should I put it up to my mic so you can hear better?
And
That's 12.
That's 12.
And with the mirror up, you can shoot at 14 frames per second. So.
How often would you use that at a wedding?
Almost never at a wedding, but I would use it. I do photograph some dance performances.
Yes.
So this is a great camera for that. With those, there's often you're wanting to get like just the right timing for the dance. Often when they're at the peak position, and use that all the time.
Yep.
Fortunately, I can shoot the dress rehearsals. Otherwise, this is kind of an obnoxious sound to make in the middle of a real performance. But for me, it's fairly useful. The only time I might use it at a wedding would be if there's some action sequence that I know is going to happen, and I want to make sure I get the moment just right. I can't think of any times I've ever needed to do that though.
Yeah, that's nice. To contrast that with when I was shooting the ski jump here in town a couple of weeks ago, February, using my Sony with 3 frames a second. Very difficult to get certain moments. That would have been nice to have for that.
I'll use it for portrait sessions. I photograph a lot of high school seniors, and a lot of them are performers or dancers, and oftentimes we're doing something with dance as part of their senior portraits, and I can use it with that.
It just allows you to catch that nice moment.
Yeah.
Nice. Next news article that, again, we've discussed some of this beforehand, make sure, not that we're on the same page, but we found out that we're on the same page about filters pretty much. But let me tell you this first. So Lee Filters has announced a new range of neutral density graduated filters that have an extra hard transition. I should have put my other filter in reach. I have those Nissies right now, and one of them I have is a soft graduated filter where it gradually darkens or lightens, depending on your perspective, over the course of the piece of glass. And you slide it in and line it up with the horizon. Now, my friend Adam Furtado, who shoots with the McKay's lots and does a lot of fantastic landscape, he likes hard graduated filters where that transition isn't as soft. He just finds it works better for him. Well, I think Lee has heard from other photographers like him because they're going with a very hard graduated filter where that transition is very brief. And I think mostly thinking about seascapes because that's when you get that really straight horizon that you can line this up with. But in talking, both of us said we don't use these filters a whole lot. I took the Lees with me to Iceland. I pulled them out of my bag a couple of times, and I never really felt like they worked well for me. Not because they're not good, but just the way I shoot and my comfort level with them isn't very high. Kind of similar?
Yeah, I have some grads that I've used before. I'm the same way. I don't really tend to use them. I see some people that use them and use them really well. I've also seen some photos where you can see they were shot with a grad. I find that, especially for modern cameras with a lot of dynamic range, that mostly I can get the full range in one exposure, and then can sometimes just tweak it after. If not, I'll shoot some simple HDR. I don't go nuts with HDR. And then, like I said before, if I can't get the range that I want in that, I'll just move on and do something different.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. Again, I think this is quite a niche market as well, but it does feel like these filters are becoming less necessary as our camera sensor's dynamic range really increases impressively. And I would be much more likely, especially with the Sonys or a Nikon, to underexpose and then just bring that exposure up in post.
Yeah, it's amazing how much latitude you can have with the shadows with some of these cameras too.
Yep, that's right. Now there are some people that want to be a purist and have what the finished product basically comes straight out of the camera. So if you're in that camp, then you might want to check those out and look into them. Now, Steve, I know that you might be interested in this next product because we've talked about, and I even actually shot with you at one point, a longer exposure time lapse. No, not sorry, a long time lapse over the course of a sunset.
The Holy Grail, right?
That's right. They call it the Holy Grail. Now, a lot of people write to me. This is probably one of the more common questions I get, and say, I want to shoot a time lapse, but if I leave it like on program auto at sunset, then the light levels never change because the camera just keeps compensating for getting darker by whatever you're letting it do, raise the ISO or lengthen the shutter speed. Or they put it on manual and then everything gets dark really fast, or for a sunrise, everything just gets blown out really fast. It's all at these times. I'm just reminded, like the DNA, how amazing our human eyes are, because it just all works so well and so seamlessly. And the amount of light that changes at sunset and sunrise is huge.
And quickly too.
And quickly. That's right. I think it's like 2 stops per 10 minutes is.
Something,
that
sounds
yeah. So there's a technique you can do called bramping, or bulb ramping, where you gradually adjust, or let a device gradually adjust the exposure of the camera to make that smooth transition without it getting blown dark or blown out white or too dark. And somebody else felt like there was a need for this, and this little device, it's called the Time-Lapse Plus. It's just come out on Kickstarter. Actually, it's been out, I think, on Kickstarter a little while longer. And where's its headline feature? Normalizing exposure in changing light conditions. That's its headline feature. So it is designed largely to automate and ease that process. Users can preview footage while capturing is still in progress by simply swiping their hand in front of the device, which is nice. If you don't need to put your hand on the device, you're less likely to bump it and move it during a time lapse. And you can monitor and eliminate the changes of accidentally setting or moving the camera. And so the whole device is designed for rugged. I don't know where it tells you you actually. Okay, so it's got an advanced algorithm for automated exposure ramping. The algorithm contains some interesting features, including the ability to recognize sunrises and sunsets and outpace them slightly when adjusting exposure to create the effect of a brightening or darkening sky and preventing blown highlights. It also bypasses Nikon bulb limitations by writing exposure compensation data into the XMP sidecar files. So,
looks pretty interesting. There's a software program that I've looked at before. I think it's called GB Time-Lapse. I think it's Granite Bay Time-Lapse, where you actually connect a computer to your camera.
Oh, yeah.
And I've looked at that. You could do it. I think it's Windows only, but it looks pretty interesting, and it's pretty advanced. And I think it can do geo-referencing too. So like it will make adjustments based on your location.
So it knows when sunset is, basically.
It's something along those lines. Yep. I don't remember the details of exactly how it works. I've never played with it, but I've looked at it, and I love this type of work, and I love time lapses like this. This looks. I don't know how this works, if it has some similar types of features to it. But certainly it looks much more convenient to just have something that you can mount in your hot shoe than having to bring like a Pelican case with a laptop.
Right, yep. And I think you do, I don't know if you still have it. I'm pointing over here to my box. I showed this in my studio tour. The Bramper, the little Bramper.
That's right.
I have one of those too.
Mine's dusty.
Mine is not dusty because it's remained in that box pretty much for the last 2 years.
Right. My box is dusty.
Your box is dusty. Yeah, I know. And that's the same idea, except you are providing the changes based on what you're seeing.
Yeah.
So this is a neat idea.
Cool.
It's on Kickstarter. They haven't met their goal yet. They've got 16 days to go. I think I looked at this yesterday. They've raised $2,000 in a day. I think they're going to hit their goal. Steve, have you ever backed anything on Kickstarter?
I have, yeah.
And have you gotten what you've backed?
I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. In a timely manner.
Yeah, there's always been a little bit of delay. I think projects like that, I think it's hard for some of the projects to know exactly how long things will take.
Yeah.
There's a new one that I'm interested in, which is a color meter for an iPhone.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that. Yep. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, whenever we talk about Kickstarter, it feels like a Kickstarter article comes up on here almost once a week. There's so many cool ideas out there. the translation to reality, I just want people to be sure. I'm batting about 50%.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And one of those was the trigger trap guys, who actually have a bramper built in that I find doesn't work very well, but I love all the other features of that. They were going to do that a separate little device, and did not make it. And
Interesting. Huh.
then I backed a movie that I never got my DVD. I'd be happy for a digital download now. Come on. It was cool, about a school with no walls and the kids developed the curriculum. It sounds like really cool. And I'm friends with her on Facebook, and every once in a while I leave a little comment under one of her pictures. It's like, can I ever go get my DVD? But let's real quick. The price is $340. I think the cheaper ones are sold out. $320 was the cheapest you could get in there at. Which, if you're serious about shooting time lapses, that's a very reasonable price. It's cheaper than some of the other options out there. And also, as we said, it looks a lot more portable and neat. So,
I'll be curious. I've looked at lots of time-lapse Kickstarter projects. I've never seen any of them really catch on that well, so I'll be curious to see what happens with this one.
Yep. We're going to move into that speed section where we're just going to kind of read off some headlines to you all and remind you that they are all linked down below. And also, thanks to our fantastic chat room for hanging out and spelling out deoxyribonucleic acid and things like that for us. But remember, if you have any particularly salient comments that you want the whole world to see, put those as comments down below when this video is all done, because your wonderful chat just disappears and vanishes into the ether. We should find some test tube to stick it into some DNA.
There you go.
Canon's got a new patent that is hinting at the future of optical stabilization. Basically, it looks like a two-part system. One part's always running normally, as we expect, and then at longer focal lengths, a second system kicks in to really add better stabilization. Optical stabilization, I said I was going to read these fast, but I like to talk. I mean, IS, VC, whatever we want to call it, it boggles my mind a little bit still that like inside the lens that it works.
Yeah, that you got gyroscopes in there that are spinning.
Yeah. Yep. And also same, I'm pointing over to the gimbal on the drone. I mean, it's just that technology I think is quite amazing.
It's pretty cool.
Roy posted this in here, and I read the headline: "The literal top dogs of Instagram make thousands of dollars per post." And I didn't, really process that whole part of literal. This is about the dogs that are in Instagram, and there is now a kind of a dog agency managing these dogs' Instagram accounts and helping them get a lot of money.
Who owns the copyrights to their photos?
That's great. That monkey bit came back into the news.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I think it's getting appealed. We'll have to talk about that soon. So, if you feel like you're struggling with your Instagram account, just, get a cute pet and start taking a lot of pictures. And Canon is going to probably debut a full-frame mirrorless camera at Photokina. Have you used the Canon EOS mirrorless at all? Those things?
I have not. No.
They're pretty sucky. And I like Canon a lot. Where's my 5D Mark III's over there looking a little sheepish next to the D5.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But,
move it.
I'm sorry, I mean my Canon 5D Mark IV, early release straight from Canon, don't tell anybody. Their mirrorless just weren't very exciting. I like the idea that they're going to go with a full-frame mirrorless. I hope we don't have to use adapters to use our EF lenses on there, but we'll see. Hopefully we'll have some direct reports from Photokina, which is this September in Cologne, Germany. Is that how you say it, Cologne?
I believe so.
Okay. Lens Babies announced the Twist 60. Have you ever used any of the Lens Baby products?
Oh, I played with them a little bit.
Yeah.
Never really excited me that much.
They're kind of neat, but we did that free lensing challenge a couple weeks ago for Instagram. That's, you can just do it without the Lens Baby stuff. But some people like that look, and if you're feeling in a rut, their gear is usually pretty affordable and can give you some different options for shooting.
It's interesting.
And then the last quick thing I want to mention is that an article from Pop Photo, and again, all of these are linked right down below in the show notes. They are working on an automated method, not Popular Photography. The article is from Popular Photography. An automated method for colorizing black and white photos. This is, the other part of technology that blows my mind is we are getting to this point where we have very smart machine algorithms. I put up most of my personal photos at Google Photos, and I no longer really tag them. I can just say, show me everything that's green by typing in green, and it will find pictures of grass and trees and my kids in green clothes. And similar thing here. They fed this computer millions of images, color ones, and then basically, I'm paraphrasing greatly here, programmers who made this probably and spent millions of years of their life are cringing right now, but then fed it black and white and said, what do you think this should be colored? And through object recognition, it decided to color these images and did a pretty good job. So it's kind of interesting to think about going back through history and taking hundreds of years of black and white photos and accurately colorizing them without a human's intervention.
Yeah, the examples look pretty good.
Yeah, I think these are some Henry Cartier
cool.
Images that they then colorized.
Nice.
So it's pretty cool. And just a reminder that we got NAB, National Association of Broadcasters, is coming up next week. And we might see some announcements. Canon announced something today that I don't think most of us in our audience care about, but it's this kind of that, I don't know if you saw this, that square camera that can be used for security and all kinds of stuff.
That, yeah.
And then a crazy 80 to 100 or 80, I don't know. I shouldn't talk about it. That's an announcement I saw that came out because that's very broadcast associated. We'll probably see some stuff from Blackmagic. Maybe the Sony announcement that is being rumored, but just stay tuned. We'll be talking about those things over the next couple of weeks. And now we move into that part of the show where I say photos from space. And better than that is things for you photographers out there to put on your calendar for 2016 that have to do with space for watching. This article is from DIY Photography. Roy stuck this in there. We're past a couple of them. Let's see. Late spring, we have a very favorable apparition of Mars. I don't know, for most of us as photographers, capturing a planet is tough.
Sure, yeah.
I know I've got at least one Patreon supporter, Caleb, is in there, and he has done some image stacking of Jupiter enough to get some detail. You can see it. That's pretty cool. Without really too much fancy gear. But something like Mars is much smaller than Jupiter, even though it's closer. I'm quickly showing my ignorance about astronomy. I mean, I know Mars is closer. I know it's smaller physically, but I don't know because it's closer if it ends up being about the same size as Jupiter. I don't know. But that's something to look forward to. All right. Probably the big one that I think people should watch out for is August 11th to 12th, the Perseid meteor shower. Then August 28th, we've got two planets in there. November 14th, the supermoon. It's going to be a full moon that occurs very close to perigee. So that's the point at which the moon is closest to the Earth. And it's going to turn full at 8:52 a.m. Well, that's not very good for us on the East Coast. And the last time the moon came this close was January 26, 1948. The one thing you do need to watch out for around that time is people posting those stupid pictures where the moon has been clearly photoshopped gigantic. It will not be gigantic. Probably for us, most people just looking at it, it will seem normal size, but it is an opportunity to get out there and photograph it. Yeah, and then December 13th and 14th, the Geminid meteor shower. And then I know I met a guy at the Sony event who's very excited about the full solar eclipse that's happening in 2017. That's going to track across from the northwest corner of the United States to the southeast. And it's pretty rare that happens so nicely. A full one happens so nicely across such a large area of the United States. Have you ever seen a full solar eclipse?
I have not.
I don't believe I have either. Definitely seen partials, but never full. I would like to. It sounds spooky when it's fully, the people say neat things happen and interesting things happen. So, all right. And there's also a great article. We're running long enough now, we're going to skip it, but there's a great article about the training NASA astronauts get to be good photographers. because they are, you see these pictures from the ISS and the guy who was just up there for a year churning out some really nice pictures.
They're just good at everything.
They are. It's true. And they're an astronaut.
That's right.
Whew. All right, those astronauts. So let's get into our Instagram challenge. And Steve, thank you for picking a few winners. This week's challenge, or this past week's challenge, was to select those. Here we go. Images that told a story. That's what I asked. In a single image, I wanted you to tell a story. And we had 91 submissions, or maybe 90 since mine is in there, and just a lot of fantastic images that I loved. There were some really strong images. They might have not necessarily told a story for me. There were some images that told a great story, but then were technically a little rough, so I didn't choose those. But again, I'm blown away by the quality of your all submissions. They're really fun to look through. And let's see, I think Steve will start with your honorable mention.
Sure. Yeah, this one was interesting to me. The story they saw, the couple, coming out of the cafe or whatever the scene is right here, and I liked how there was the use of selective focus or shooting through glass, shooting through stuff. I don't know exactly what the technique was, but I thought that was really interesting. The way they show the couple that's coming out, going. It's almost like the moment in time is stopped for them, where there's a blur around them. I just thought that was interesting. This one I had a couple. Am I allowed to give a couple suggestions?
Absolutely.
I think it's whenever you're photographing people in an environment, I think it's really good to think about where they are and where they're placed. You have to get the right moment and the right gesture, but I think they're just outside of the frame of the door. I think if this photograph was taken just maybe a second earlier, they would be framed nicely by the opening right there. You might lose the interesting reflection of them next to them, but that might be something that you could think about. And then if there's any way to time it so this other couple wasn't there, I think because they're in focus, the couple that has their backs to us, because they're in focus and the other couple's in focus, it draws too much attention to them. So those are a couple suggestions I had for that image.
I think they're great suggestions. I see a lot of times pictures where, and we never know the story, this might have been your only opportunity, but as critiquers, this is what we're saying, where if they had taken maybe a couple more or waited a moment, the image would have been much stronger.
Yeah, sometimes it's waiting, sometimes it's just a really slight change of position.
Yep, great. And now your second honorable mention.
Yeah, this one I just really liked the contrast of the kind of older rustic boat with the more modern looking building. And I really liked the use of different layers in the landscaping image, where you have the reflection and then the boat, and there's actually some really interesting reflections. So there's like 4 or 5 different layers that you see, and to me, like, that brings me into the image, and it makes me think about the story of who came on the shore here and what they were doing up to that building. You can see a little path that goes up there too.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's very cool. Do you want to try pronouncing this church?
No. Oh yes, I can say that word. I can't. No, I can say the one below it. I can't say the church name, but I can say the name of the town.
Oh, let's hear it.
Sticky
Sticky-Sholmer.
Yep, I've been there.
Nice.
Beautiful.
Where in Iceland is this?
It's on, if I remember correctly, I hope I don't embarrass myself with my Icelandic geography. I think it's on the west coast.
Huh. Yeah, maybe. Or
maybe not.
I can't. Why doesn't the?
But I can say it at least.
Yes,
right?
you did. You did a great job. All right, let's move on to your winner now.
So this one just captivated me the most. Going through the thumbnails, what I did was to do a pass through first, and this one jumped out at me the most. I don't know the story this person was trying to tell, but to me, I think it's an interesting human element with the hand right there. And then I think you're seeing, I like layers, I guess. The other one had layers. This one, I think, has several layers where you have the dandelion and then the wood and then the trees in the background. It also shows different scale and different perspective of the small tender dandelion, the old hardened rustic wood, and then the growing tree behind it. To me, that was just an interesting kind of look at different parts of life in different stages, and I thought it was really interesting.
It's a great image. It's a lot of strength. I love it. It's very good. All right, and my first honorable mention. This is kind of honorable because to see you went through some work for this. Look, if you look carefully, I think this is printed. I don't think this is a Photoshop job. It says down here, Photo Week, brought to you by PhotoRec TV. Winner, once-in-a-lifetime photographic safari to Tanzania. So you've got this newspaper sitting at your morning table with an old camera, coffee, some kind of breakfast, or maybe the sandwich, I don't know. But it's got a lot of neat elements to it, and I just really appreciated that you brought in PhotoRec TV. So if you ever want to get an honorable mention, just, let me talk about PhotoRec TV. Another honorable mention is from Colin, and I love the framing. I mean, you just used this very apparent and easy framing system, but not only did you do that, but you caught this moment so nicely. And just a few moments ago, we were talking about, waiting or, changing perspective. All of that just lined up nicely, plus the time element as this coin is going right into the cup and Perfect. The guy sitting here. And it tells a complete story, and it does it very well. Another honorable mention is Angela's. I love what I see here. We've got this dog snout. Now, the image itself, I wish, I think black and white could work here because our color balance is a little funny. But all of that doesn't matter because the story here is so strong of this dog snout that's clearly big up above, poking through or right there at the hole, and the little white dog down below. And you wrote a little story over here, but I didn't need that. It told the whole story right here in this image, and I think that's fantastic. Thank you, Angela. And my winner, because all I want to say about this image is there's good fishing that-a-way. I mean, I love the colors, I love the motion blur, and he's a little blurry himself, but it all works. You can see that there is some exciting fishing that-a-way. So Evans Head, thank you so much for participating. Thank you to everybody who participated. As I said, there are a lot of really great photos in here, and I was inspired by 2 of them to give you next week's challenge. So Colin's, why did I say Colin? I am Cameron. Your use of layout and multiple images to tell a story is great. Plus, you got some great hair, dude. It's good stuff. Good hair. So Cameron. And David has a great shot right here of 3 little ducklings grown up. So for the first time ever, it's not that big. I guess every challenge is kind of the first time ever on here. We haven't really repeated anything yet. But I want you to use multiple images in one image. Use the layout app, or you could do it in the print module in Lightroom, and put together 2 to 3 images. You could do more if you want, but it's probably going to get cluttered. I would stick to 2 to 3 images. It doesn't need to tell a story necessarily, but 2 to 3 images that work well together to provide impact. I think that's the best way to say it.
Sounds great.
Okay. And again, thank you everybody who participated. So, we should timestamp this right now because this is where we're going to talk about switching from Canon to Nikon, and that is why everybody has been waiting to hear a little bit more about this, and I'm going to get nasty comments about people who are like, I wanted to know why you switched from Canon to Nikon, and I had to watch 40 minutes of you talking about ducklings.
Yeah, people can talk about this a lot. I'm not someone that's brand loyal. I'll use whatever tools I think will do the best for what my needs are.
Yep.
It was interesting. I was thinking about my whole history with cameras and Canon and Nikon. My very first film SLR was a Canon Rebel. My very first digital camera was a Nikon Coolpix 990. I don't know if people remember that one, but the one that had the little split.
I had the 990 or 995, and I loved it.
It was awesome. It was a great camera.
Yep.
And then the very first digital SLR I got was the first Canon Rebel, which was the first sub $1,000 digital SLR. So then I became embedded a bit in Canon. I started to invest in more equipment and shot for a long time with Canon. There was a point where I was curious and played a little bit with Nikon and had a Nikon body and shot with that a little bit, but it didn't make sense because I had all the Canon stuff and it worked for me, and there was no draw for me to switch. And then 4 years ago I played a little bit with medium format. I used a Phase 1 camera, which was phenomenal quality, beautiful images, great dynamic range, lots of latitude and editing.
Yep. Just because there are probably some people who did skip the beginning in the intro, let's just remind folks that you are primarily wedding and portrait photographer.
That's right,
Yep, okay.
Phase 1 medium format worked great in the studio for portraits. It was great outside to be able to sync my flashes at 1/1600th of a second, and I used studio strobes outside a lot. The camera itself, I didn't like at all, and has one focus point and slow to work with, and didn't meet my needs and was really expensive. So I, outgrew my phase one. It was interesting to play with, but
That's funny to hear you say outgrew my
right.
phase one.
I don't know what it was. My phase, right? Got out of that phase. But the files just have a feel to them. I don't know, when you're playing with images and you're editing, there's a certain amount of latitude that you have for editing, and the phase one files were amazing with what you could do with them. And then I started looking at Nikon, and I think Nikon had some more advances in their sensor technology, and I feel like they have more of that. I think they have a little bit better range, and I think they're more editable. I think especially in the shadows, they have more latitude, and I can pull the shadows up more. But I think when you're thinking about a system, it's not just a sensor. It's not just a single camera body. It's not just a single lens. I think you have to look at the whole system and what it has and what its advantages and disadvantages are. I think Canon has great things. I think Nikon has great things, and I thought a lot about what made sense. And I really liked Nikon sensors. I liked Nikon's range of lenses. For the event work I do, I shoot a lot with the 24-70 and the 70-200. I also really, really like the 14-24. I think it's a really nice, high quality, wide angle that doesn't fall apart. Does night sky really well too, which I like that aspect for a lens of that focal length. I work a lot with lights, so I work a lot with the ProPhoto system. I use the B1s, which are their battery-powered strobes, and I also work with speed lights. I really like Nikon's flash system better than Canon's in some aspects. I think it is more accurate and consistent in exposure. I think the way that the B1 system and the TTL that's integrated in the B1 system, it works better, in my opinion, with Nikon than it does with Canon.
Again, the same kind of consistency of exposure, is that?
Same kind of consistency of exposure, and those are really cool. You could talk more about those, but you can do a quick TTL shot with the B1s, and they'll get the light really, really close, and then you can just flip a switch or push a button, and
you're telling me
blocks
that
exposure and that power output on the flash manually, which I wish the speedlights could do that. I will say that Canon's radio speedlights are awesome. They're great. I don't shoot that much off-camera flash with speedlights. Speedlights I use on camera bouncing. Occasionally I'll set up some speedlights in a reception hall for just some accent lighting. So when I've been switching to Nikon, I lost that radio control to have those accent lights in the reception. To me, that wasn't a big deal. Nikon does have the SB5000, which I got a couple of those when I got this camera, and they do have radio technology into them. You do have to add a little wireless transmitter right here on this camera, which I wish you didn't have to do that. I wish it was built in the camera. I have it on order. I don't have it yet, so I haven't played with that system yet. But that may be a way for me to have everything, like the things that I was missing before. So it can be expensive to switch. To me, I invest in gear as part of a cost of doing business, and I like working with high quality stuff that's reliable. Nikon system for me has great advantages, and for the way I shoot and the type of work I like to do, to me it's a system that works better for me.
Nice.
As far as the specific bodies, what I had before was a 1DX and a 5D Mark III, and then a third backup / photo with camera was my 6D. I like big bodies for a couple of reasons. With the 1DX, you get a little bit better your low light performance, and this has great low light performance as well. I do like a vertical grip, and I just like the feel of a pro big body in hand like this. If I wasn't shooting dance, though, I wouldn't necessarily need this. I could get away with a couple of D750s and a D810. What I have now for my quiver of cameras for Nikon is I have the D5, I have the D750, and then I have the D810. So the D810 I love because it's a higher megapixel count. It goes down to ISO 64, which is only 2/3 of a stop, but for shooting outside, I like that control of the ambient light a little bit more. So I'll use that for outdoor work, I'll use that for studio work. And then the D5 is great low light camera, great high speed camera. And then the D750 is also a great backup and great low light camera as well. I wish that camera manufacturers, when they make the button layouts for everything, would make it much more consistent, because when you jump between
models, between bodies,
bodies, it's a little bit different for each one. And I try to keep the way I work really simple, where I don't try to change that many controls. I just like to have a few things that I like to know where they are and where to change them. So for me, it's not a big deal to switch between those. But yeah, I'm very happy with my switch. It's a little bit of an investment to go with the Canon stuff and then to switch. But as I get older, I think I invest in less lenses and focus on just a fewer number of lenses that I really like.
That work for you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Should we watch your eBay to pick up some nice Canon deals
I do
anytime
have
soon?
some stuff, yes.
Yeah.
There's some stuff for sale for sure.
Yep. That sounds good. I think that's all reasonable. I think the important thing to remember, people get caught up in brands, but the important thing to remember, and you said it, is you find what works for you and gives you the tools you need. And as a professional who's trying to do a job, multiple jobs, that's what you want. And I don't know. I'd say you are a pixel peeper to some degree because you definitely care about your quality that you're getting.
Yeah, I don't obsess.
But you don't obsess. That's good. That's the way to be.
It
I wish
is.
more people out there were like that. And some of us YouTuber people that sit here, we actually don't help because we talk about some of the details that I think when you get these tools in your hand, just make it work for you and get out there. May I hold it for a minute?
You bet. Yeah, it's heavy. You ready?
I'm ready.
Two hands,
I think
yeah?
I haven't I worked out so much yet. So it does feel very nice. And do you have it on the continuous high speed right now?
It is still set on that.
It's very fast. And as we talked about earlier, if you missed, you did opt for the CF cards in here.
That's right.
How do you?
You were halfway there, then just push the button. Yeah.
And Nikon has said that they will swap out to the XQD in the future if you wanted to do that for a cost.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And to me, it's really important to have bodies that have two cards. I always shoot with two cards that have an immediate backup of every image I create.
Yeah. I think that is important too. I've been shooting with a Sony some at weddings as a secondary camera, and it only does have one card slot. I don't think it is as much of an issue because it does seem to do a really good job of image recovery. Mm-hmm. But it does make me a little nervous to have to rely on that technology and not have an automatic backup because maybe image recovery when I pop the card out and it lands in a puddle, right. Image recovery doesn't really help so much in that case.
To me, that's part of it too. It's not necessarily like in-camera corruption. It's a backup. So like I'm often shooting events with two bodies, and if I put one down, I'll take one of the cards out, and I'll always have the images on me. Yeah. So that way I'll have one in there, and then if the camera gets stolen, I still have the other card.
Right.
Yeah.
We hear these horror stories from time to time of wedding photographers that have stuck their gear in the car and then gone and done something and it's all been stolen along with the images with no backup. You've got to keep that stuff on your person until you've put it into the computer. Yep. So, all right. I think that's good. If you have specific questions about Steve and his transition to Nikon, you can put those into the chat and we will pull them out. But we're going to move into the part of the show where we answer your questions live. And so if you have a couple of them, we will answer them. So Rhonda's got a question. She's got a T5i, so similar to the first Rebel. I also started with not the first Rebel, but the next one, the XT. That was my first Canon Rebel.
I know that.
So Rhonda's got the T5i. She's got the 18-50 Sigma 2.8, the 70-200 Tamron 2.8. What to use to fill the gap between 50 and 70? So on a crop sensor, what to use between 50 and 70? My first thought is, do you have to fill that gap? It's not that big.
Yeah, my first thought was use your feet. Just move like a couple steps around, because you're not talking about a big change in focal length.
No.
There's nothing that, to me, that jumps to mind that fits that niche.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that there's something necessarily that you would need to. I think you could just, if you can slightly change your camera position, I think that would be a better thing to do.
Yep. If you were dying for something, there's the Canon 60 macro.
Right.
And that also gives you a nice macro.
Yeah.
It's just a good lens and a good value. But I don't necessarily think you have to have that in there.
I would agree.
Yep. And then Roy's put another one in there too. Okay. When did you switch? And does the promise of the 5D Mark IV tempt you, or did it tempt you to wait at all?
There's always going to be new cameras out there, and I don't look at rumor sites. I don't really think too much about them. Mm-hmm. It's been a gradual transition. There were two things that I was waiting for before I fully jumped ship. The bigger body to come out, so I was waiting for the D5 to come out. And I was waiting for the radio speed light system because I felt like that was the one thing I would be giving up. So I started the transition, it's been slow, a year and a half ago. Mm-hmm. And started with just the D810. The D810 was my replacement for what I could play around a little bit with the Phase 1 camera.
Yep.
So I got that one first, and then just one lens for that, the 7200 I got, which is my favorite lens. And then I slowly built up a few more lenses and then got another body. So it's been a gradual transition.
How did you find that shooting two different cameras? I know you were shooting both at weddings and matching the look.
Well, two different camera systems between Nikon and Canon will throw you off a little bit because their zoom is backwards.
That's right.
So like a train ticket, you go backwards a little bit. So like if you're talking about the decisive moment, you'll miss a half second as you're adjusting.
Yeah.
So that part takes just a little muscle memory to train you, but not. It's not like you're going to be stuck for a while.
Yep.
I've never had trouble going between different camera bodies when the same system, whether it was the 1DX and the 5D or the D750 and the D810 and Nikon. The layout's a little bit different, but again, I don't change very much. I like to change my shutter speed, my aperture, my ISO, my focusing system, and I don't really do that much else. And if I just can memorize where those controls are and do those without thinking about anything else, I'm fine.
Yeah.
So for me, it's not an issue. A good friend of mine who shoots with two Canon 5D Mark IIIs, he was looking at my 1DX a lot and really liked some of the things that offered, but he knew about the way he shoots, he would have a hard time switching between different systems, two different bodies like that. Yeah.
And then how about on the post-processing side of things, working in Lightroom?
Oh, yeah. I think you mean between the same system, like two cameras from Nikon?
Yeah, having a Nikon file and a Canon file next to each other. I mean,
there's differences there a little bit. Within the same system, there's differences as well between different Nikon bodies and different Canon bodies and different lenses within the same system. It's never been something that's made me pause too much. I think you have to maybe tweak the color a little bit, contrast a little bit sometimes, but I've never had issues with big mismatches.
Good. Yep. Now I saw somebody ask Vinny, I think it scrolled by, won't you miss your 85 f1.2? Did you ever shoot with 85 f1.2?
Yeah, it's a great lens. It is a nice lens. It's a little slow to focus.
Yeah.
And I found for moving around quickly, I love it for low light, and I love the shallow depth of field. I'm not a super crazy razor sharp shallow depth of field guy, but to me it was a little too slow sometimes to focus, so I won't miss that aspect of it. I'll probably pick up the Nikon 85. The two prime lenses that I enjoy the most are the 35 and the 85. So I had those for Canon.
Yep.
I will probably get those for the Nikon too at some point. I don't shoot with primes that much, but there are times where either I just want something that's smaller and lighter and makes me focus more on my composition, or just something where I really need those extra stops of light, which I think becomes less of an issue as cameras get better and better.
Yep. We got one more question that we're going to answer here from Kane. Toby, because the Sony a7R is mirrorless, the sensor can easily become dirty. What's the best way to prevent this? I don't know. I don't know if I talked to you about it. That is a serious issue on my Sony cameras. The sensors they're right there. There's no mirror to deflect the dust. I don't know how much the mirror deflects the dust. Even more so on the Sony full frame. And it does get incredibly dirty. I think part of my issue is I use an adapter, that ComLight adapter, totally not weather sealed, not dust sealed at all. I think that's where some of my issues are coming from.
Dirty with dust or smudges?
Dust.
Dust,
yeah.
Okay. And how do you clean it?
Rocket blower. So Kane, the answer is, I don't think you can really prevent it other than making sure you're using weather sealed lenses and try to avoid switching lenses in dusty environments. But in my experience, it's just going to get dusty. Step one is a rocket blower. Get close. I have a video about how to clean your sensor. Step two is cleaning your sensor. Now at Photo Plus Expo last fall, I watched the Sony techs in the booth. They had a little glass booth where they were cleaning. I watched them blow on his sensor. One of the techs.
With their mouth?
With their mouth.
Oh my God.
I thought, all right.
I don't think that's a good idea.
I know, I didn't think so either, but so get in there with that rocket blower and otherwise pick up one of those dust wand kits that will take care of it for you.
I do have compressed cartridges too.
Oh yeah?
That do not have whatever it is, the fluid or the contaminants in it. I can send you a link, but they work really well. Really,
cool.
really clean air, and it's a really strong blast.
Yep.
You go through the cartridges pretty quickly, but it's really clean air, and it works really well to blow dust off. Yeah.
Cool. That's a good, I'll check that out. And I have, Steve, you probably haven't seen this. I'll show it to you before you leave. I know it's out of reach right now. I have a lens that looks like the 85-1.2, but it's actually a vacuum.
Oh, I have seen that.
I don't think it works.
Oh, no.
I haven't really tried it yet. I've just played around with it.
So you're saying it sucks?
Yes, it sucks. It's good. It's good. All right. So, all right, one more question. Oh no, we're gonna move to the after show. A couple of reminders. So we'll answer those questions in the after show. One is that this week's episode is brought to you partly by Adorama Picks, and we've got coupon codes for small size prints. So that's like your 11 by 14 and smaller. You can save up to 20% with PXPRRBT20. Did you remember that? We'll put it in the show notes right down below. That brings those small prints down in the range of like $1. The smaller ones under $1. They're incredibly cheap. Somebody who follows me on Snapchat this week sent me a nice snap. They just got several prints in that they ordered. They are ecstatic. They're beautiful. One of the things I love about this channel is hearing from you all. And Adorama Picks does great prints, and they come quickly, although they're about to go on their long holiday, so you might have to wait a little bit. But this coupon code is good until April 17th, and there's also one for your 16 by 20 prints and larger. So again, that will all be in the show notes. And speaking of Snapchat, you can follow me on Snapchat, PhotoRecToby, especially as I'm headed off on the travels. All of the little in-between bits, me either complaining about my airline seat being too small, or maybe the gate agent hassling me over my carry-on, or positive things too, like cool scenery as I'm on a road trip tomorrow with my friend Steve, headed towards Moab from Salt Lake City Airport. I'll be sharing all of that on Snapchat. It's a lot of fun, and somebody sent me a really nice note about how much they enjoyed my snaps. Or last week, I went out and helped salamanders cross the road, and I taught you all about how beavers slap their tail and why these salamanders are crossing the road. It's a lot of fun, so you should follow me on Snapchat. And if you don't really understand Snapchat, that's okay. I don't actually understand it too much either, but I figured out enough to be able to share snaps with you all. Are you on Snapchat, Steve?
No, but my teenage daughter is.
Your teenage daughter is.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Means I probably should be too, right?
Yeah. And so we're going to wrap this part of the show up and move to the after show. So the after show is one, if you're watching live, you get to continue watching with us. We answer a couple more questions and then we jump into critique. Actually, I think tonight we're just going to jump right into critique. But if you're not watching live, only the Patreon members get access to this portion of the show. Those are those wonderful people that support this channel and everything that we do here, because it's not free. Not only the electricity for the lights, but more so Riley is a little bit more expensive than electricity. And since he's been here, the show has improved immensely. And not only do you support all of that, but you get support back in growing as a photographer or videographer, or in my drone video coming out, I say in drone photography, with this awesome support group, access to our Lightroom videos that teach you all about installing the program, using it up to a professional level with some portrait retouching. It is just packed full, and you get all of that, plus that support group and people who are ready to answer your questions at any time. It's a wonderful group of people. I thank those who are supporters and invite you to consider becoming a supporter, because you also get your images critiqued in the after show. That's another perk of being a supporter at the $5 a month level. So you can check all of that out at photorec.tv/support. So we're going to end this part of the show. Steve, thank you so much for coming, for bringing along the D5 and sharing some thoughts about making that transition. Yeah, thanks. You can find, Riley, can we put up the, thank you, Riley. So Steve's Instagram and Facebook are on there, so if you want to follow along and check out his work, you should do that, because he is an excellent photographer. And we'll see you all in the after show in just a few minutes. Bye.